We've heard lies from the Liberals about what they're going to do with the carbon tax, and Carbon Tax Carney committing to bring in a shadow carbon tax.
A new and bigger carbon tax, and in particular insanity, a carbon tax on steelmakers at a time where we're staring down tariffs.
Mark Carney was in Regina. He was talking about steel and getting our energy to markets. This is a guy who applauded canceling major energy projects that would have made us less dependent on the United States.
The Federal Conservative Caucus gathered in Ottawa today, just 3 weeks ahead of the election of a new Liberal leader. Now, that contest will decide who will replace Justin Trudeau as Prime Minister. So how much is that race now influencing Conservative strategy? Well, until this week, Pierre Poilievre's party has enjoyed a double-digit lead across a number of public opinion polls. But things seem to be shifting, with a number of firms showing that that lead is now less than 10 points. Have a look at this poll from Leger. It suggests if Mark Carney was leading the Liberals, he could pull the party's support up to a tie with the Conservatives. That shows they're in a dead heat. Those numbers are likely why we saw this new attack ad from the Conservatives. Have a listen.
Trump wants our jobs.
We're going to take other countries' jobs.
And Mark Carney is just the man to help him. Trudeau and Carney sold out Canada with job-killing taxes that push jobs south. He opposed Canadian pipelines while profiting off U.S. coal.
All of this ahead of a huge Flag Day rally tomorrow being hosted by the Conservatives at a convention center in downtown Ottawa on Saturday. So I didn't notice in that ad anything talking about axing the tax. So is this just a natural progression on who they bet will win the Liberal leadership? Let's ask the front bench. Sabrina Grover was the federal Liberal candidate in the 2021 election. She's now a senior advisor at Spark Advocacy and North Star Public Affairs. Rudy Husney is a political commentator and a former Conservative leadership candidate. Former Ontario NDP MPP Gurdatin Singh, he's now vice president at Crestview Strategy. He's also the brother of federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. And we have Laura Stone. She's Queen's Park reporter at the Globe and Mail. Rudy, I want to start with you on this one. It seems like there's a shift, and it seems like they are having Mark Carney in their sights. Talk to me a little bit about why they have shifted focus here.
But I don't know if you can call it a shift. I just think that, we know now that Mark Carney is the front runner and is going to win. I do believe that it's kind of the beginning of an election campaign. And what's rule number one in an election or when there's a new leader is to define the leader before he's able to define himself. The same way the Conservative did it with, for example, Michael Ignatieff just visiting or anything. And the Liberals have been trying now for weeks, especially Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney, to kind of neutralize the carbon tax by saying, oh, we're going to, shift it or whatever. So the Conservative want to remind, I believe, Canadians that it's the same kind of policy, because the Liberals are trying to neutralize it because they know they cannot go, for example, in a campaign with the carbon tax as the main message. So I think that is just normal. And look, the rally that is going to happen tomorrow, Pierre Poilievre, I believe it's his signature in the last 2 years to hold very large rallies. I mean, that's how he campaigns. And I believe that the event tomorrow, especially because it's Flag Day and we know what's happening south of the border, it's kind of an opportunity for Pierre Poilievre to, again, talk to Canadians, especially that the House is not sitting. So as a leader of the opposition, it's very hard, to have media exposure when the House is not sitting, when you don't have the opportunity to basically ask questions every day and have media exposure because the House is prorogued, Parliament is prorogued. So rallies are the way forward to communicate for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives.
It's funny you say that, Rudy, because he always has a seat welcome here on Power Play, but he never seems to take that opportunity if he wanted that kind of media exposure. But Sabrina, I guess I'll just shift to you here on, do you believe that this is sort of a new focus, not just on Mark Carney, but when you consider what Rudy was saying there about what Pierre Poilievre will do and what he's expected to do at this rally tomorrow, do you think that he is also trying to sort of change the tact sort of inward and now looking more at that fight against Donald Trump and positioning himself as the person who can take on Donald Trump?
Oh, I definitely think he's trying to change tactics. I just don't think it's working, and I don't really see it working over the next several weeks. So I think there's a couple of problems with the way that Pierre has approached changing tactics and why I think it's not believable to Canadians. You can't spend 2 years talking about how broken Canada is and essentially like talking about how terrible it is to live here and how bad things are and how terrible life is for you. And then all of a sudden, we're expected to believe that now you're Canada first and you're Captain Canada. You're going to wrap yourself in red and white at this rally. And that's your patriotism. Like, it's just not a believable shift in message. And it's comical as well to see that shift, right? Because at the contrast side with the Liberals, you have a leadership candidate in Mark Carney and in Chrystia Freeland and Karina Gould that look really serious about the issues that we're facing with Donald Trump. And they're not just wrapping themselves in the flag and holding a rally. They're actually coming up with plans and policies that are believable in combating the threat that Donald Trump provides here. And, I think at the outset of all of this idea that they're going to be able to, I don't know why they continue to actually bring up carbon tax at all, whether in this ad, whether in that caucus meeting. It's become so irrelevant to the conversation. And now we're meant to believe that the carbon tax is the reason that Donald Trump is threatening us. Like the links between the advertising and the policies and the messaging that the Conservatives have is so tenuous. It's just not believable. And I can't understand what the next step is for the Conservatives in actually establishing a plan or a policy going forward.
Laura, I wanted to pick up on something that Sabrina was mentioning there and how a lot of what he had said, to Sabrina's point, was that there were problems with this country. Is it a bridge too far for him now to go and wrap himself in the flag and to sort of be this proud Canadian?
I don't know if it's a bridge too far. I mean, I certainly see the Liberal perspective on why they would think that is, and that's a valid thing for Sabrina to say. I think as the winds of politics shift, it would be foolish for Pierre Poilievre not to acknowledge that. And so I think you kind of have to accept, although I'm sure he's crying into his pillow every night that Justin Trudeau is resigning and leaving as Prime Minister and leader of the Liberal Party, because very much the Conservatives wanted to take him on, obviously, and they've been gunning for an election for quite some time. You look at the polls and you can see why. And you look at the bounce now with Mr. Trudeau stepping aside, whether that's real and sustainable with Mark Carney or whoever it may be. It certainly looks like Mark Carney is the front runner in this race. Remains to be seen, because it's kind of a false premise right now. And we were talking about this on radio this week, Mike, of this bounce that we're seeing from Carney. If he does win the leadership, how much of that has to do with kind of the shiny new thing? Do people really know what he stands for? He hasn't campaigned really ever as a politician. And so there's a lot of question marks there. But I think what's most striking about this ad from the Conservatives is the fact that from the start, they're acknowledging Donald Trump. They're talking about standing up to him. I think that's a very sharp kind of change in tactic, and certainly I think there's sensitivity on the part of the Conservatives to be compared to Trump and the Republicans down south. And so they're clearly trying to distance themselves there. And they clearly see Mark Carney as their prime competitor and as the biggest threat facing them electorally. And that's why you see the Conservatives trying to define him, as Rudy said, before he can define himself.
Yeah, and Gerdeton, do you think that they'll be effective in trying to define him before he can define himself?
I don't think they're going to be effective at all, because they're going to have such a hard time in redefining themselves right now. They put all their eggs in two baskets, carbon tax and Trudeau, against the carbon tax and against Trudeau. And now both of those baskets have been taken away from them. And as the Conservative Party attempts to rebrand, what they're really facing is an issue that was really really positively articulated earlier, in the sense that the Conservatives are so closely tied in terms of language and connection with Trump and his administration. They both share the same, Pierre and Trump both share the same slogan of common sense revolution. Pierre openly accepted the endorsement of Elon Musk, someone who's working hand in hand with Trump as he engages a variety of cuts to public service and economic war against Canada. And overall, you just see connections even beyond that. You know that J.D. Vance is close to one of Pierre's lieutenants, Jamil Jivani. So across the board, there's so many deep connections between the Conservatives and the Trump administration that they're going to really need to focus in right now on how they can rebrand themselves in a manner that is believable. Because when you tell Canadians for years that Canada's broken, and you try to wrap yourself in that Canadian flag, everyone looks at that and they see it as disingenuous. And that's what the Conservatives are facing right now. They're really running into the pitfalls that they themselves have dug. And now we're going to see them attempt to change that narrative.
And we'll see how that plays out over this weekend and then over the weeks to come.